I would say that I stepped into old patterns that mirrored the very thing that my body was familiar with. My consciousness was the fight or flight kind of mode. I was used to that. It felt safe for me. So I did get myself into patterns of abusive relationships, not physically, but emotionally. Because in my mind, I thought, well, if there's not physical, then that's better than what I grew up in.
The hardest part of trauma isn't necessarily what happened to you. It's realizing it's still running your life. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and this is Move Your Mind, where I host raw conversations with the world's leading minds about the hidden struggles behind their success and the mindset it takes to become the best version of yourself. Over the last 15 years, I've given thousands of talks on mental health, mindset, and behavior change. And I'm now bringing those conversations to you. In this episode, I speak with Tenille Bentley, who's an award-winning entrepreneur, mental health advocate, and trauma survivor, about how to break the trauma cycle so you don't pass it on to the next generation. Tenille, so nice to meet you. Thank you for making the time to come on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real honour.
Appreciate it. And I'm in New York, you're in Perth, and we were just talking before, we've coordinated outfits. We didn't even have to tell each other. We just knew, telepathically we've wound up in the same outfits.
Yeah, totally twinning right now. I love it.
There you go. So are you able to give me a bit of a background on yourself and the work you do, and just so our audience can learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So my background is quite varied, but specific to Alma Education, which is the Emotional Literacy and Mindfulness Academy. And sort of, I suppose, the threads that connected to how that came into creation. It was kind of a sort of a stone step, if you like. There were multiple steps that led towards what we're doing now in building what is a global ed tech company and hoping to shift some pretty big needles of behaviours and leaders and generational shifts. And I suppose where that all came from was I grew up in quite a, domestic violence. And so for me, it was, I witnessed things at a very young age that I think no child should ever have to witness. And, I remember being, a young child and thinking to myself, even though it wasn't my role, but I felt the responsibility. I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Where are my resources? And what do I do with all these emotions? And I didn't know what to do at such a young age, about 10 years old. And, as I grew up, obviously I witnessed all those behaviours of unprocessed emotions, being unable to know what to do with them, playing out in destructive behaviours as a teen and into the early adult years, until such time that I had, I had the natural gift of self-inquiry. And so I would always inquire, why am I doing this? Why is this person doing this? Why is that doing that? So I was always like that, even from a very young age. And that led me into, that beautiful saying where your mess becomes your message, and so I turned what could have been a predictable self-destructive path into something that was substantial. In the St. Francis prayer says it beautifully, which is, it's by self-forgetting that one finds. And so I began the process of self-forgetting. And that looked like a charitable organisation that I'd set up and ran. And that was for about 10 years. And it was really helping families that were impacted by domestic violence, that were impacted by abuse, or impacted by, that were just simply disenfranchised and needed support. But one of the main things that I very naturally sort of said about it when I led the charity was, I don't want to put people in a bucket of labelling, saying that this person is a perpetrator and this person is the victim. So for me, it was really a case of looking at redefining how we were supporting people in the whole holistic family dynamic. And the reason being is because I am deeply empathetic, which is no surprise. I run the Emotional Literacy Academy, but I'm deeply empathetic, so much so that I feel it sometimes on physical, visceral levels with people. And part of that allowed me to have a bit of compassion and also understanding for the perceived perpetrator and the perceived victim, and understanding that there's a lot more behind the veil of what's going on in that, and the behaviours that sort of overlap with that, and where that's actually tying in from. So I always had this ability to sort of see behind behind the veil, I suppose you could say. And so part of that played a role in the charitable organisation. So fast forward, we did that for 10 years. We touched the lives of 50,000 children in 5 different countries, helping children find a voice because often children are silenced in those situations. Raised a lot of money for the charitable organisation, but I reached a point where I realised it was sort of a band-aid solution. It wasn't a sustainable one. The very thing that I was talking about, and I kept talking about it, domestic violence, abuse, the language that I was using, I was actually finding that I was attracting a lot of that into, like the very thing I was trying to solve, I was actually creating more of a problem by talking about it and focusing on it with the wrong language. And so, well, not wrong, but just that particular language. And so I realized at that point that I had to shift. I had to shift from focusing on the problem to focusing on the solution. And shifting that meant going from focusing on, all the issues around what create this. And then basically it came through in a form of meditation or prayer. And I just sort of said, how do I make a sustainable change? Like, what do I do to make real change here? Because I feel like I'm running on a pedal here and I'm not shifting. And I kind of got the guidance that, it started with our children and it needed to be their emotions. Because I said to myself, what are the key things that actually drive all behaviors that play out? It's an inability of understanding how to process and how to be with our emotions, what to do with them, how to have compassion for ourselves and compassion for other people. And so fast forward, that's where ELMA Education was born. And we are now, graduated thousands of children. We've got children who are even nonverbal that can express how they're feeling. They're able to self-soothe. They're able to tell their parents and actually regulate even better than some of their parents because it wasn't our narrative when we were growing up. So we're all sort of learning as we're going and doing the best we can with what we've got. So that's where it sort of got me.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I've got a lot of questions about your story and that side of it. Before I go into that, can you tell us a little bit more about what Alma Education is, what it involves, just so we can understand that?
Sure, yeah. So what we do is we provide workplaces, we provide schools, educators, and also at home. So it's at work, at home, and at school solutions that provide them with tools that are very easy to use. It's a specific new emotion language that we apply, and it directly impacts the crisis of mental health, stress, and emotional well-being for all ages. It's been a 10-year project in the making. And, we have done a lot of work in development of all of these programs. So it goes all the way from 2 years old up to adults in the workplace. And we're basically giving them tools to understand at a very different way, understand their emotions, understand other people's emotions, what to do with your own, and how to also have a deeper level of empathy, a deeper level of compassion, because I think the world would be a far different place if our leaders had emotional intelligence skills, the ability to have self-awareness, to have, self-management, to have social awareness and social management, which are the 4 key quadrants of emotional intelligence. So we teach this through the lens of our own approach. For children, we use sound therapy, art therapy, colour therapy, and play therapy. For adults, and teens, we use conversational and connection-based exercises that really help. What we have found is it is really helping with, with across the board with mental health in general.
Amazing, yeah. And I mean, approaching it from early education is so important because that's really the only way we can make sustained change. I guess it's a band-aid solution otherwise. So, and there's just not enough good preventative solutions out there. It feels like, I guess you were talking about that a bit earlier, a lot of it, I'm in the mental health space, so very similar, and a lot of it feels like there's reactive services.
Yep.
And the government will put a lot of money into that, but then that becomes the status quo when you're servicing a problem. So you need to have it, but how do you actually go all the way to the beginning and, try and fix the core of it so we can build a better future and make those changes? And so I think it's an incredible thing to do.
we're talking with, governing bodies like the Mental Health Commission about the programs, about how, because it is preventative. And, we've got kids that are still in nappies and non-verbal that can clearly express where they're at and can self-soothe. And that's incredible, to be able to regulate their emotions at such a young age is we've seen across the board in the early childhood centres that they're in, children are calmer, children are happier, children are able to express better. It doesn't mean they're not going to have moments. We're all human. But they've got the tools now, right? So that it becomes it basically becomes an extension of their frontal lobe, which is not even switched on yet, which is the regulatory tool for us to manage our emotions. Now, we as adults have that, but we still have tantrums, right? And then we look at kids and wonder, why can't you not have a tantrum? It's just like, well, because their frontal lobe's not switched on. They don't have a tool. So we're simply giving them a tool through these modalities of play, art, sound, and colour therapy.
Yeah, and I guess helping to educate them while their brain's still developing, because I guess we get programmed often, as you're talking about in your story and on many different levels through all of these traumatic things that happen, and then that informs so many decisions we make, and you get stuck on that treadmill. So it's so important while the brain's developing to have that infrastructure in place.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen, by the age of about 9, I think it is, that, a lot of before the frontal lobe switches on, a lot of their behaviours they don't have the capacity to accept or reject anything at that age. So everything just goes in. And so they're patterning all of that in. And then we wonder when we get to, 40 plus and we hit what they call the midlife crisis. Well, that's just simply us driving behind the wheel and not realising how we got to the end destination. Because we were on autopilot, and the autopilot is that subconscious patterning that we've been programmed, and unless we become actively aware of it, we can only change it through 2 ways. It's the repetition, or the other way is emotional impact. When you have emotional trauma, it changes you as a person. So we have the capacity to rewire as we're adults. So it's not like the end of the, we're not stuck with what we've been given. We're not victims of our genes or anything like that as epigenetic states. So, we have the capacity to completely do that. And if we can give that to children at a young age, we're actually, truly working in the space of preventative care and not intervention.
And I guess as an adult, you have to often, they'll say it takes getting to a place where you're in so much pain that not changing will actually be more painful than making the change. And it often, or almost always, gets to that point, because even if you do have that awareness and you want to make the change, even then it can be incredibly difficult to change. So it's...
Well, it takes, when you look at how the brain works, when you look at how the brain works, it takes 6 weeks for a synaptic connection to occur, 6 months of repetition for it to become a redundant habit in the body and memorized within the cellular memory of the body. So that's a lot of work, especially as an adult. If you've ever tried starting a new language or trying to get back to the gym or trying to learn a new instrument, all of that is very difficult because it's so embedded. So it takes a lot of repetition to really rewire. And 6 weeks is when the initial hard work is 6 weeks, and then 6 months of repetition and then you've got yourself a new habit.
And then after that, I guess you've got to still maintain it, because it would be,
Correct.
You can easily fall back into those patterns if you don't then maintain that habit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting what you were talking about before with having, empathy, I think, so important. And I love what you're saying with leaders need to be more empathetic. I think no wonder we live in, such a capitalistic world, and no wonder so many of these problems are here, because it's really, it's kind of depressing when you peel back the layers of so many different, parts of life. Just look at how the world works. It's greed, money, power, and we really do need more empathy. And I think it's interesting you're talking in the case of domestic violence from both sides as well, not condoning what the person's done, but being able to try and understand. And I think that's such a difficult, delicate thing to sort of dive into, because you don't want to, it's got to be clear that this is wrong, this cannot be happening, but
Mm.
why is it happening? Why did they, what is their backstory? What got them there? And, I think we see that with, you'll hear about someone who has a drug problem or, has committed a crime or whatever it is. It's almost like we instantly write them off. Okay, that's done. They're not a good person anymore. And it's always so much more nuanced than that. And again, it's not about condoning the behavior. It's about trying to understand, well, why are people doing this? And it comes back to that preventative thing, what's happened. Then it can give us a bigger picture of what the problem is if we actually look into this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a lens that we need to, it doesn't mean that, like you say, it doesn't mean you condone it. It also is important to make sure you have healthy boundaries in the process of it. So, I always say my father's passed away now, but we went full circle and I went through a full forgiveness cycle with him. And I was able to sit in a place where I truly and deeply loved him, regardless of all the things that occurred, because I was able to find a place of, I looked at his wounded boy, and the wounded child, but I also made sure I had healthy boundaries. If things were crossed, I had to walk away or I had to step away. So it was a bit of a dance in trying to do that, but I reached a point of, how do I utilize this situation as one of my biggest spiritual assignments?
Yeah.
How do I learn from this person who I've chosen to be my father? And, how do I begin to use this as an assignment for me to really understand human behavior? And, within the guise of also making sure I'm not subjecting myself to, to anything that's not acceptable either. So it's a balance, but I still think that it can be done. And, on his deathbed, I was with him, and I said to him as he passed, all is forgiven. I love you. All of the wonderful things you did for me, but please just, go to the light and all is forgiven, and just released that, so he didn't have that attachment. So, but not a lot of people can't get to that point. But I started doing the work when I was probably 17. So, and I'm 45 now, so it's been a long time.
That's a beautiful thing. And not an easy place to get to. And I guess the message would be also for people, not to, well, I guess this is to ask you, people not to go down that path of trying to forgive or do that until you're actually healed yourself. Because I guess
Absolutely.
if you tried to do that while you're still in that trauma,
it's not going to work.
Pattern,
you're going to keep getting triggered. You're going to keep getting. You need to get to a place where what they say doesn't charge you anymore, and that you can stay solid in your groundedness of who you are and understand and see it for what it is, as opposed to embedding, because it's a very intricate web, the domestic violence sort of dynamics, and it's a very I describe it like it's like a sticky web. It's very hard to kind of maneuver through. It's just so many layers of emotional trauma that cause all these play outs of behaviors. So it's certainly something I wouldn't recommend just jumping in to do, and also always seeking professional support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we just need more conversations about, more education. I think men really need to be educated so we can understand the dynamics of it, so we can, I've learned a lot about it because my girlfriend was, domestically abused, and just saw from that the aftermath of what she's described, how debilitating it was. And she was lucky that she came through it and used it, similar to what you're talking about, as a way to really look at, okay, how can I understand this properly? How can I use this as a way to try and educate myself to then use it as a cause to help other people? And I think that's such an amazing thing. I think that's how like what you're doing, I think it is more important than anything, because even if you're listening to an expert who studied something for, 20 years, I think you're going to learn more from someone who's actually been through it and come out the other end.
100%.
But, from my learning with her, it made me, and how many people behind the scenes, right now I'm sure there's thousands, millions of people going through this that will never even talk about it and stay stuck in it. It's kind of terrifying.
Yep. Yep. And I think the more people that do bring it to the surface, it just gives people permission to be a little bit more open. But even then, there's so much shame around it. There's so many dynamics around it that people, the nuances, unless you've been in it, you wouldn't understand. It's so intricate. Like I say, the best way is it's like a sticky web. That you're just really you want to get out, you're trying to get out, and I had to watch those play outs occur a lot. It was just, and then all the dynamics that come with that, there's a whole lot. So for me, it's, how do I turn that into something that can support, and I think a part of our soul's journey is how can we give something back that also contributes to the growth of our own journey. And I think with Alma Education, that certainly, does that, in that I see children who were my age and have come out of domestic violence, and I'm giving them these tools, and they're able to say, Mummy, I feel my energy ball, because we have an emotion language. My energy ball feels angry, it's red, or my energy ball feels green, it's calm. And we give them tools as to how to manage all of that, and just to see the shift in their behavior was something so simple. So the concept with the children's program is that we all have an energy ball. It sits in our heart. Sometimes someone might throw their energy ball at us, but we can only hold one energy ball at a time. So we have to drop our own if we catch theirs. Now, what happens if we catch their energy ball? We might feel what they're feeling. So we have a choice. We teach them through tools. You can either put smiles into it and send it back, and then pick up your own energy ball. Or you can also give them a different color energy ball to help them feel better. Now, it sounds it's quite a deeply complex scenario, but let me tell you a story of how it plays out in the real world. So we have a 6-year-old. Mum comes home, or dad comes home from work. 6-year-old, within a split second, looks at the parent, says, "Don't throw your energy ball at me." Walks up to them, says, "Here's mine, it's green. You can have mine," which is calm. And so what's happening, if you unpack just the basics of that, you've got a 6-year-old who cares enough about their emotional grid system to say, do I want to take that on or don't I? And they've very clearly said, don't throw your energy ball at me, because they've picked up intuitively that mum or dad's energy ball is stressed. And they're like, no, I don't want it. I'm not catching it. And then they go up to the parent with compassion and say, and empathy, and say, oh, mine's green, do you want mine, which is calm. So, if you look at the psychology around that, the capacity to be able to make that discernment, the agency that we're giving children to be able to really start to care about their emotional grid system and choose what they'll take on and what they're not, and just to be able to make the concept of, is it mine or yours? Adults don't even know how to do that. We walk into a space, someone's in a bad mood, we catch their bad mood, and that's it. But, we've got kids that are not even out of nappies that are doing this. It's incredible. Can you imagine what kind of adults they're going to be?
It is incredible. And I was going to say that. I was going to say, as you're describing that, adults need to bloody be doing this stuff.
Oh, they do. Yeah. Yeah.
It's totally unbelievable, Yeah. Like how many adults do you think are driven by emotion and aren't aware of it, and
aren't
adults doing
all of them? We make emotional decisions before we make logic. We're hardwired that way. Even though we might like to think we're as logical as possible, we're very much making these logical decisions. I'm sorry to break it to you, but your brain is wired. It makes the emotional one first before the logical. So we are all emotionally driven. So yeah, we all need this, and it's not it's not like saying it, putting anyone down in our generations or the older generations as well, the younger ones. It wasn't our narrative. It wasn't something. Emotional intelligence wasn't even a word in my years. It didn't exist. So we've got to also have compassion for ourselves and just be open to learning this, and our kids, which is brilliant, and we're seeing this across the board, are teaching it to the adults through the very program they're learning in the early childhood centres. So, yeah, it's amazing. Or in the at-home program that they do as well.
It's incredible. It's so important. Do you think the modern world is taking us further away from, getting to that place where we can really be listening to our emotions and making that space? Because it feels like we're on a treadmill or a hamster wheel. Like it's, everyone's trying to compete, get to the next level. Social media now, we can compare to everything. Everything's 24/7. When do you switch off? When do you give yourself that space? In the work that I do, I can't even tell you how many men that I've spoken to that wouldn't even set 30 seconds aside every week to allow themselves to just be still and think about what they actually, that would seem like a weird foreign concept, to just be still and think about what do you want, what do you care about, because it's always about the next thing. And it's kind of scary, like how many of us are living a life, I think you were talking about it earlier, where we are just on autopilot, and we may never actually, give ourselves a chance to analyze what's going on deeper inside and realign ourselves.
Yeah, and that's why. So with all of our programs for adults in the corporate market, in all of our philosophy is as little screen time as possible. So our kids have like little mini cartoons, but they're no more than 5 minutes. And then everything else, all the other exercises are done offline. It's all done, even with the teenager program, it's done offline. They have to do reflective processes, printing off something and writing down. So we're still trying to find that balance for them to be able to have that window of time to switch off. And yes, it's definitely, as AI is coming in all its glory, it has some amazing, benefits, but there are also, we have to tread very carefully, in how we're actually using these tools. Are we using them as tools? Or are we merely using them to completely replace our capacity to think, our capacity to be creative? So there's a balance between it. I think it's important, yes, use it as a tool for your business, but also being really aware of when you are using it and how you're using it. I think that's, essential, and we don't have that. And with the AI coming in as much as it is, the biggest skill that's by a multiple of 5 or 6 that's going to become the most important skill in the modern world is emotional intelligence. It's going to be the social skills. It's going to be the human part of us that can't be replicated through AI. That is going to become more important, like the ability to have that self-inquiry, that self-awareness, the social management. Those skills are going to be essential, I think, in the modern world. So.
If you're listening to this and you want to make a change in your life but you don't know where to begin, I've created a free Move Your Mind masterclass that walks you through how to build sustainable habits and make change that really sticks. And you'll also get access to a free weekly newsletter where I post practical tools and stories that I don't share anywhere else. To watch the free masterclass, head to go.nickbrax.com/moveyourmind. That's go.nickbrax.com/moveyourmind. You can also find the link in the show notes. It terrifies me looking at where it's gotten to right now. Like if I think about where the hell is it going to get in 20 years time? Like it's just, I can't even mentally go there, because where does it go? Like it's just going to keep evolving. Like it's scary. It's kind of crazy.
I think the thing that I always bring myself back to is the biological hardwired need for humans to connect. I don't think that's ever going to leave us. I think we are going to go through a phase where we may binge on the technology, and then we'll hit a point where it's like, oh, I actually want to go out to a theatre and be around people. I actually want to go out in community. So I feel like as humans, we will adapt and find ways. I'm optimistic, but I am cautiously optimistic.
I totally agree. I think there'll be a period where, we're adjusting, and like you're saying, we might be binging on it. But I think longer term, it's just going to be so overdone. I mean, even now, there's the amount of noise out there, the amount of content, the amount of just stuff everywhere. It's exhausting. And I think it's going to be so valued at such a higher level to be actually doing stuff in person, whether that's catching up with someone, going to a theatre, going to a live concert or whatever it is. I think that's just going to become more valuable because we're built for that. We're built to be in communities and connecting, and I think it's just humans are so contradictory that we're, intelligent, we've advanced this much, but we're also incredibly stupid because we make all of these advancements and actually pull ourselves further away from where we're meant to be, and then we try and make more advancements to fix that problem when we didn't need to find an answer, really. Like all the basics have always been here.
Yeah, the art of simplification, I think it's something that we are all going to be wanting to cultivate over time and realize, bringing it back to nature, bringing it back to simplicity, tuning in with the rhythm of Mother Earth. I mean, she's the one that's holding us and has done so well before we were here. So, there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge in that, but we just have to switch a few things off to be able to tune in.
To tap into it, exactly. So if you don't mind me asking, with your dad, what did lead him to behaving in that way? Like if we look back at his past, because I think it's interesting to look into that side, especially for men that are listening to this, to understand what actually causes someone to behave in that way.
Yeah, I think it can never really be a generalistic answer because we're such complex beings. It could be so many different layers of trauma. But we do actually, Alma has a great partnership with the Outback Mind Foundation, which is a men's circle initiative that works with regional communities in Australia and in giving them these tools and helping in specifically in domestic violence. So they run incredible men's circles and, supporting and conversation and trying to change that old paradigm of sucking it up and not just trying to, the old paradigm of what masculine we think is meant to be, which is, don't cry, don't show any emotion, don't, all of that. So I think there's an undoing that needs to happen there, which is, going to be generational. But, I think if I looked at, specifically with my dad, he in his environment, he grew up, in a certain way. He witnessed probably certain things that made him, program in that was how you were in a relationship, perhaps. So I had to understand his backstory, and I did that. I spent some time sitting with him, and I was just like, what was life like for you growing up? He grew up in a very tough upbringing, where you had to fight to survive. That was it. It was the survival of the fittest, in his world, in many ways. And so you translate that to being an adult. It became his modality, I suppose, of coping. But then at the same token, there was also the dynamics of with my mother as well. So there were, dynamics of layers of trauma and then her story of trauma as well. So you bring two people that have got very wounded, that haven't processed what they need to process in order to have a healthy relationship. And then all it ends up being, by no fault of their own, is doing the best that they can with what they know they have. And so they play out these sort of toxic cycles together, thinking that, that it's normal, but also thinking that, and in their world, it was better than anything they grew up in. So, but in my generation, it's not acceptable, so it's just how our generations change and what we accept and what we don't accept. And we start to learn more about human behavior. We start to learn more about, trauma and the layers of trauma and how that impacts us long term. I think we're only just now sort of, starting to see those long-term results and studying it more and putting more of a spotlight on it. And as a result of that, I think it's changing the narrative generation by generation. But I think regardless, your identity is not formed by blaming your parents for how they brought you up. I went through a phase where I did that. It was all I knew. I was like, well, this is my history. This is why I am this way. It's because of them and blah, 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 and so that was my wounded child. And it was, I had to step out of that and go, well, no, I've got to take responsibility now. This is my life. So I'm changing the narrative. I'm going to change how I perceive it. I'm not going to lay blame. I really do understand that they did the best that they knew how with everything that they had. That is all I could ask. And they gave me and my sister amazing opportunities by moving here to Perth. So there's a lot, in their world that they gave us that they didn't have. So I always try to shift the focus onto that and sit in a space of being more grateful for that than anything else.
Yeah, so important. And I guess, being in that phase where you are playing the victim is part of the process. That's one of the steps of, moving through and healing from it. It's a necessary part to go through. I feel like a lot of people in the world are stuck playing a victim, maybe not even knowing that it's because they're suffering from trauma or whatever it is. There's something deeper down, and you just see it so often in people that the world's against them. Everything's everyone else's fault. Nothing, they're always being let down and whatever it is. And I guess if you're stuck in that, it's very hard to get out of. Do you think there's a lot of people stuck in that situation?
I think, I think we all have our own patterns that we play or that we repeat. I think it's more a question of are there people that are aware of their patterns, therefore interrupting it to be able to make an educated choice of whether they want that pattern to serve them anymore or not. That, in essence, comes with learning emotional intelligence. How do you start to understand how you tick, and using some of these tools that we have as to how to sort of break that down and really get clear on what is inherited here and what is serving me and what's not serving me and how can I change it. I feel like, it's evident we are the macro and the micro connected. The biology of the world is sort of like the biology of the technology of the whole universe, where we're like the cells in the body that are moving around. And of course, in the body, there's also healthy cells and there's unhealthy cells. And, a part of that is, I suppose, a part of the part of the journey toward healing, isn't it? So I think people who are in that, I think the ones that don't realize they're in it may very well go through life without even being aware of it, and it might serve them, and that's their life's journey. No judgment, that's how they choose to be. If it serves you and you're happy in it, do it, But
Yeah.
if it's not serving you, that's where you have to have the query, and it's like, well, I'm not where I want to be. I haven't got the people around me that I thought I did. I'm not in the relationship that I thought I was going to be in. It's not. There are things that are reflecting back to you that you're starting to notice. And the biggest red flag is, that there's that great book, The Body Keeps the Score. Our body will tell us. You'll either get illness if you're suppressing. You'll have things come up that your body is trying to tell you this is not in alignment. This is no longer in alignment. And so being able to be aware of that, I think, is key. Now, are there a lot of people out there? Well, yeah, I think but there's also a lot of people out there that are doing the work and are waking up to themselves, not just, waking up to wanting to shift and learning more about neuroplasticity, learning more about neuroscience and stepping into that, because everything we teach in Alma is based on neuroscience. So, it's a really important thing, I think, that, that we need to remain open to, always being a student.
Yeah, there's no end. We never stop learning.
Yeah.
When you were first sort of going through the phase of recovering and trying to come through it, were relationships hard for you?
Yeah, look, I had noticed that some of I had when I was younger, probably an 8-year stint with a really healthy relationship, but then the top and tail of that, so when I was just coming out of high school and when I was sort of in my mid-30s, I would say that I stepped into old patterns that mirrored the very thing that my body was familiar with. My consciousness was, the fight or flight kind of mode. It was I was used to that. It felt safe for me. So I did get myself into patterns of abusive relationships, not physically, but emotionally, because in my mind I thought, well, if there's not physical, then that's better than what I grew up in. So, and so it was just this, and then it was, okay, hang on, no, wait, the emotional abuse is not good either. That's actually not a good thing. In fact, it's more damaging. So it was a case of that unpacking, but I had to go through the contrast of what I don't want to be or what I don't want to call in order to be able to step into, okay, what does it look like that I do want to call in? So I didn't last long in those situations. I was out pretty quick and managed to step away. So I had the awareness to go, okay, no, this is not okay. Boundary set. I'm changing tack. So it definitely has played out in my life in programs, in patterns, and still very much so. I notice the nuances, like I'm in the fine-tuning phase now, it's just, okay, I'm getting closer, but there's still those programs and those patterns. And so I work with, I always have, and I always recommend people too, I've got a great psychotherapist that I work with because I want to work through the layers of the stuff that I don't know. I know I've done a lot of work, but there's still a lot I don't know. So I'm working through a lot of those layers and consistently just doing the work, investing in understanding the layers that make up me and how to work with them, how to understand the disconnected self, how to understand the different layers of the person that shows up when she's got to be strong because that's her response, all the different masks and all that. So understanding that, whilst I've done a lot of work on that, it's always great to have an independent, qualified person to sort of support you on that process.
Yeah, and I love it that you can talk about, where you're at now, that you're still working on things. And I think it's a really important message. And I guess if I look at my mental health journey, similar thing where I try and be really open about, okay, like these are things I've overcome, but I'm learning other new obstacles, and I'm, so far from, where I'm trying to get to, and so many things I'm not aware of and still learning. But I think people need to understand that, because we can look at, I guess we're conditioned to look at things in, black and white. Okay, how do I get a silver bullet? What do I need to do to just get rid of that thing? Okay, now I've done that, forget it, it's done. And it's absolutely not how it works. There can't be an end goal with it. It's about, yeah.
I think the thing that took the pressure off me, because I've always been like an overachiever and I wanted to overachieve at this, and I was just like, but then when I realized I was putting so much pressure on myself, and I realized that it wasn't about that. And the thing that alleviated the pressure was that it was like, Tenille, there's no end destination. You're not going to get like a gold star at the end of it. It's just, it's a forever lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice. So I am forever tweaking the micro behaviors in me and watching all of those, because I do have complex layers of trauma given what I grew up in. So I've got to really watch all the nuances, and I'm really in tune with that. I can really see it for what it is. And sometimes, does that mean that I still play out that program? Yeah, sometimes I do, but I watch myself playing it out, and then I'm like, I know what you're doing. And that begins the process of unraveling. And it doesn't mean you're going to stop it straight away and be like this, this guru sitting on a mountain saying, that's not where I intend to be in that sense, because I'm human. I'm going to meet people that just like rub me up the wrong way. I'm going to meet people that trigger me. And it's just like, it's all these things that come up that life will throw at you constantly. And the goal is, how do you remain unwobbled by that? How do you not get wobbled by all the things that come in? And the only way to be still and grounded in that is, in my opinion, emotional intelligence skills, mindfulness skills, prayer or meditation. Those are things that I think all of us could adapt and apply. And it only takes 10 minutes a day. So it's not a lot of work. It's just a lifestyle change.
Yeah. And it's probably easier to go and become a monk. Like, the extremes are easier, to become a monk or to just be like a workaholic and ignore your personal development completely. Extremes, you only have to think about one thing. And I was talking to a psychologist about this, and he works with elite athletes and Olympic athletes in the US, and he was saying, it's amazing the level of discipline they have, but he was saying in some ways it's almost easier, well, at least mentally, than a normal, like just day-to-day life, because day-to-day you've got to deal with money issues, relationships, your job, this, that, the other. They're really got a singular focus.
Mm-hmm.
Every single decision is just about competing in sport.
Yeah.
And that's why they have problems, when they go into the real world after, because then you're not learning those other skills. So, and you see it with people I've seen it with a lot of people in the personal development space that got into it, similar reasons to what we're talking about here, where they've had their own experience, and then they go to the extremes where it becomes conspiracy theory realm, and they're, taking it to a new level and all-encompassing. And to me, that feels almost harder to get out of, because you've now gone into the same addictive pattern, but through something that was meant to be healthy. So then it'd be hard to get out of.
And this is where the importance of self-awareness, and having that, not just self-awareness, because you can get be interpreted get misconstrued into narcissism. So, I think it's a fine line, and it's how do you have spatial awareness. So have self-awareness, but then have awareness, and that's empathy of what's happening around you. How is it impacting people around you? How do you feel you're showing up in this space around people? Is it serving you? Is it not? And always questioning, always querying. Like I am forever querying myself. Okay, I do something, I reflect. Was that how I wanted to? Was that on an alignment? Yes, no. And if it wasn't, then how do I shift that for next time? And I'm constantly tweaking all the time, whilst also remaining very grounded in the human experience. So it's a balance, but.
How do you go, or what has been your relationship with work? I guess if I go from my example, I've been an overachiever. I've put too much pressure on myself. I've tried to, find my identity, I think, through trying to achieve things. And it's something that I don't think I'll ever find complete balance with. But I try to be, I'm more balanced now. I'm more aware of it. So I'm interested with everything you're talking about, and, you sound ambitious, and obviously what you're doing is amazing, and such an important thing, but it's a big thing. How do you find that?
So I started, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I declared to my household that I was going to be a businesswoman, and I wasn't going to have any children. I would have thousands of children, but I wasn't going to have any children, and I was going to be in business. And I started my first business at 8 or 9 years old. I employed the neighbour across the road. I gave him a cut, and I took a cut off the top, and he did the work. So I was very much an entrepreneur from a very young age. Translating that into an adulthood, for me, it became an addiction. It was a way for me to find a sense of identity. I found myself and lost myself all at the same time in my work. And that was something I had to have a real journey with. And I still feel I have a balancing to do with that, but I have got a lot better. But I do always say I don't have children. So, I think that does help. It's one of those things to reflect back on. And yeah, definitely, as I went into my adult years, it was all about achieving. I built a 7-figure tech company in under 2 years. I was sitting on boards as the youngest woman on boards, ASX listed companies. I was, won awards that were recognized by the Prime Minister and, Telstra Businesswoman and all sorts of different, Financial Review, got all these amazing accolades. But what was so interesting is that it didn't fill me up. I did all that, but it didn't actually fill me up in the heart space the way that the work I do with Alma does. The work I do with sound therapy does. It's these elements of being able to give wholeheartedly to something that really feels like you're making some kind of difference, or even if it's just a tiny bit. Like it'll be a tiny shift in the needle, but I'm seeing it on the ground with children, and I'm witnessing the change, and that to me is priceless. And no amount of awards or no amount of anything is going to ever do that. So I've reached a point in my life where it wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about alignment. And that's the point that I've got to. So I went through, and I think it's very normal for us in those 20s and 30s. It's all about building. It's natural for us to want to build our life and settle down and, you know, acquire, succeed. So it's sort of that kind of bracket of time is not unusual to people. But when it shifts is where you really start to step into alignment. You know, when you realize it's got nothing to do with ambition. Who are you proving it for? You know, like when I would work so hard, it's like, who am I doing it for? What am I trying to prove to who and why? And a lot of that was because I did in my earlier days when I was working 16, 18-hour days, hospitalized from exhaustion. I worked so hard that, you know, I realized that I did all that and it didn't matter. None of that mattered. In the end, I did all of that, but for who? And it came down to this. I did it because I thought to myself, as a child, I felt that through growing up in the environment that I wasn't loved, I wasn't heard, I wasn't seen, I wasn't accepted. As an adult, I translated that through the addiction of work to say to people and let the world love me and say, see, you appreciate me. I'm worthy. I'm enough. I am loved, you know, and it was this whole reflection, big mirror of self-worth. And it was like, who am I doing it for? I'm just doing it because I want to be loved and accepted. I want to be acknowledged and seen and heard and valued, which were the very things that I felt I didn't have a voice when I was younger. And all of those things played out in how it was I was attaching my identity to my work. You know, and so as I began the process of unraveling that identity, it really, and it meant what I did was I went into almost isolation for 18 months and I started taking on different practices and I just stopped and I sat in the quietness. I also voided myself of any temptation that I was wanting for 18 months. Chocolate, whatever, any of it, whatever the human temptations came up, I didn't allow myself to have that because I didn't want, I mean, it's a bit extreme, probably wouldn't recommend it, but it's just my style. And, you know, I would do this and I did it because I did want to disconnect from the very thing that made me always go out to fill me up, looking out to fill me up. And I was like, if I can just void myself of any temptations, then all I'm stuck with is this. And I've got to look at it and I've got to go through the dark night of the soul. I've got to see the elements of me of why, what is it? When all of that is gone, when no one is looking, who am I? You know, when there's no audience, when there's no one to please, who am I? And that's where I took it to. And I stepped into that real quiet space of self-inquiry. And it completely transformed my life and it made the shift from ambition to alignment. So now when I do things, if I get rewarded or if I get recognized, it's great, it's lovely and I'm grateful for it, but it's not why I'm doing it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I just relate so much in my own journey to what you're talking about there. And it is, yeah, I guess it's about finding something that's bigger than you, you know, that you care about, that's not about self-gain and a cause you genuinely care about. And for me, when I really established a path in the mental health awareness sort of area, I eventually found it so relieving because it was always about I was initially on TV shows and wanting to get more fame and then businesses and I want more of this. And I was always just so anxious and never felt right. And it was always about the future and getting to this thing. And then when I decided I just want to make a change in this area, it doesn't matter in what way though, whatever it is. And then it becomes so much more tangible because you're not measuring it by external things. You know, I'm doing it right now by having a conversation with you and you can then incorporate it into your day and it's just, yeah, a nicer way to live. So
Well, it's
I think
more
it's so important.
fulfilling. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and it's that sense of finding a deeper purpose. My favorite saying is, the purpose. This Pablo's one. It's the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. When you step into the first phase of your life, it's all about acquiring the gifts. What is it? So it's natural for you to go through that. So it's go through that. Step into that, have the contrast of that, and then you step into, okay, now how do I give this away? And that to me is the most fulfilling thing you can do. I get so much joy out of buying someone a gift and giving it to them and watching their face, and just that sense of giving, but without the attachment to anything. So to give without attachment, it allows us to detach from ego, even though I still say it's a healthy bit of ego is fine. Having a good relationship with our ego is good, but it helps us step away from just being kind without an agenda.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. Like you're saying, we're all get caught up in the ego and chasing different things, but we actually get more for ourselves if we do things for other people, or if you do it for, trying to give back or whatever the reason is. So if we looked at it from a selfish perspective, you're actually going to get, a lot back. So it's a good way to frame it.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners go if they want to learn more about you and Alma? Is that what Alma? Did I say that right?
Yeah, Alma's. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So
If they want to learn about it, where can they go? Yeah.
Yeah, so ELMA, which is Emotional Literacy Mindfulness Academy. So Alma, ELMA, education.com. So that's pretty much where you go for all of our information on emotional literacy, and anything that you're interested in on a personal level is tenillebentley.com. So TENILLE Bentley, BENTLEY.com.
Great, nice and easy. So that will be in the show notes. Make sure to go and check it out. We finish with 5 closing questions. So these can be sort of whatever answer comes to mind for you. First one, what is your best childhood memory that comes to mind for you?
Talking to the animals. I grew up on a farm and, I grew up on a hobby farm on 5 acres in the Australian bush. And my favourite thing to do was going out to the goats or the chickens and sitting down and telling them about my day.
I love it. What would you say is currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
The need and this desire to the pressure we put on ourselves. I think it's this, the noise being so plugged in, but also the inability to make space to listen to our soul, to make space just to listen. That to me is like the biggest component.
When we are in that stuck place, when we're going through those really difficult times, it literally feels like you'll never get out of it. And it feels like nothing will ever be good again. And everything just becomes just overwhelming. And I think to remind yourself, no, you know what? I've been through this before and I've gotten through it. I'm here right now. I might not have the answers, but it's okay. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to work it out. I think it's such an important thing.
Breathe, breathe, breathe.
Yeah, because when we sort of are stuck in our nervous system, we can't think clearly, you can't think creatively, you can't come up with the solution, and it's a counterproductive thing, because when you're really panicked, you want to act to try and solve it because you're stressed. And often you can pour petrol on the problem rather than just stopping.
Yes.
Just less is more sometimes. Do you have any regrets in life?
I think that, a lot of people respond by, no, I wouldn't change anything. But, the one thing I would change is how I spoke to myself, how being kinder to myself would be what I would change, to be kinder to myself. I feel the simplicity for me, is happiness and contentment. It's got nothing to do with anything external. It's just got to do with being in a place where I'm in alignment, and I feel that what I am doing is making a difference in the world.
I love that. So simplicity, alignment, and balance, I guess, are key. Appreciate you making the time.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for, sharing me with your community and your platform. I'm very grateful.
And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. It would mean the world to me if you can subscribe to my channel, leave a like or comment, share it with your friends. It makes a world of difference. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps me to get this show bigger and better and bring on the guests and the production value that you ask for every single week. I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much.